I got a couple loose ends to finish up with here on this Cobra 142 GTL today. The first thing I need to do here is get the volume control out of here. It's shot. Actually, the squelch really isn't much better. And the dynamite is even worse. Yeah, all the pots are shot on this thing. Doesn't look too bad in there. Just pretty darn wore out. That is a 10K. Yeah, kind of what I thought, a 20 millimeter shaft. Well, these are actually 16 millimeter shafts. General rule of thumb is when you want to buy pots, buy 2 of 6 to 8 varieties of them. That way when you get them, you're guaranteed you're going to have probably at least one of them that's going to do what you want it to do. I ordered 12 different pots just to replace one volume control. It's complicated. It can be an extremely daunting task. I was hoping to get away with the shorter ones here. Might be able to get away with the shorter ones. I hate to use the long shaft pots because they're the hardest to get. Right there is where the splines are just hitting, so it's got 1/4 of an inch, 5/16 of an inch to press down and go inside. I think these will work. Now, unfortunately, we don't have anything beefy on here because these are PC pins, and that's not really the greatest way in the world because there's some pretty stiff wires on these. There's a ground wire that you really can't see back behind because I can't pull it out far enough. It's coming off this end here, and then the shields for the cable are coming off that end. And there's no way I can really tie them all into these PC pins because that would just kind of be a disaster there. So I think what I can do to take the stress off these pins is to pull all these shields off and put these shields into one common wire, a smaller gauge wire. That way I can connect the smaller gauge wire onto the PC pin, but have all these heavy stiff grounds floating that aren't actually physically tied to this pin, if you understand what I'm saying. Now the audio wires here, the white ones, they won't be so horrible. Where there's a will, there's a way. I thought that one would actually be twisted on there through the center. I didn't even know that it would actually just kind of fall off there. Usually they wrap these wires so they can be a real pain in the rear to get off because there's eyes in those terminals. They're not wrapped on any of these. Now, as far as the switch goes, that's a whole other can of worms. See if I can get that lucky for these just to fall off. That one's probably through the eyelet. I don't have enough hands here. Just kind of spin that one around there, see if we can get it to fall out of that eyelet. So the part number for this pot that I'm going to stick in there with a short shaft is a 652 PTR 901-2015 KA103. 20 millimeter shafts are a 652 PTR 901-2020 K103. You can see there's quite a difference. The knob will go on and it'll go on pretty well. It's just we won't have as much of it in, but it'll be fine. You'll never know it. Now onto the switch here, because this is where things kind of get messed up a little bit. These switches won't do what this radio needs. I don't know what the rating on the factory switches is, but it would make sense to me they would be at least 4 or 5 amps on the contacts. Full load current on these radios is typically 3.5 amps. That's where this relay board will come into play later on down the road. You know, I always say this in all my videos. One change in electronics brings on another change. That's just how it works, at least a large percentage of the time. Now I need some black wire. This is number 24. So what I want to do is, these things are stiff as a board here, combine these three together into one wire. That way it takes all the stress and the strain, well, at least the majority of it, off these little tiny PC pins. This one here is really, really short. This is a black with a white tracer on it. Strip that one back a little bit. I just want to make sure everything got soldered up together. One was a little short when I twisted it. Shrink those all up together. But I am going to have to solder the other wires onto the switch. Otherwise, once I put those three front ones on, I'll never be able to do it. I just have a continuous length of wire here. That way I know it's going to be long enough and I can just cut it in half then. Because this here has to go to this relay board. So that means that these power connections are going to have to get moved. They're going to go to, hopefully, the top of the radio. Make sure that those are tinned good. Now this black wire, I think what we're going to do is bend this big stiff part back, put a tie wrap around there so that doesn't fight me when I try to get the wire soldered onto this pot, like so. Now we'll put the ground wire on first since it's the wire furthest away from me. Doing this stuff is all about finding ways to create more hands than God actually gave you. That's what it's all about. It also helps if you have nerves of steel, but you know what? My nerves have been shot since, I don't know, like 1978 or something. Now this one here is really going to fight me. Oh, yeah. I soldered it. The iron also hit the back terminal too and took it off. I can put the pot against the cover or against that plastic to try to hold it there. Use this finger to try to maneuver the wire. Put my pinky on the front of the radio to stabilize the iron. There we go. There we are. Since these things here are stiff as a board, I could just stick it in that hole like that, and I think it would go in there fine and probably last forever. But me being the type of person I am, I don't like the idea of that. It's not all the time that glue is a good thing to have in electronics. Glue and electronics really don't go too well hand in hand. But I think this is going to be one of the cases where it will. Because we can put it into those pins and it'll lay in between them. What I like about this E6000 is if you got a fresh tube of it, it kind of self-levels, almost like concrete. But you don't really have a lot of time before it skims up. And then once it skims, it doesn't level anymore. So you don't really mess with it. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You just kind of put it on, put it in the position you want it to level in, and then let it alone. Slide it up there into the hole. I can't see with all these stinking lights in front of me. That's alright, it went on enough to hold, that's for sure. But if that was any shorter, it wouldn't have. And here's the two wires that are going to go to the board to turn the power on. Now these wires here can just all be shoved back to the other side of the radio. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wires. This is the part where things get real bad. Basically all this stuff that's right there can't be there. That's what I'm saying to you. Because this has got to go there. That presents a little bit of a problem because the DDS-BFO board is directly underneath there, and I need to have at least 2 standoffs on this board, and then all these wires are going to connect into there. If you see the method to the madness. It's a very easy, simple concept. Carrying it out isn't so easy to do. 2-hole 440 standoffs. That one will screw onto there, but man, there just isn't any thread left. Alright, there we go. Now we got 2 standoffs at a high altitude. That way these cables can go underneath. These little panhead screws, I'll tell you what, they're a real pain in the ass. There we go. It's just not really an ideal thing, but we don't always have ideal choices in things that we do. You always try to shoot for ideal. If I ever have to take that DDS-BFO board out of there, then I'm going to have to take this out too. But that's the only way this would go in there, is to make a sandwich out of it. Now we got to connect the relay up. This one here is the power wire, which is the unswitched voltage coming from the regulator. And yes, there's a method to the madness here. Everything has got to have its own direction and stay in its own space. That'll work. Now these are the 2 wires that we soldered onto the switch, and I didn't know how long they were going to need to be, so I made them out of one 5-foot piece of wire. And these are going to switch this relay coil. You see there's a diode down here. The cathode of this diode sets on 4, the anode of this diode sets on 5. So what we need to do is use that on-off switch to pull this relay down. That's just a clamp diode there across the relay coil. When you apply power to a coil and you de-energize the coil, there's a flip back. There's a reverse EMF voltage generated. It can be hundreds and hundreds of volts. Anybody that's ever attached a battery or something to a buzzer or even a relay coil for that matter, and did it while their fingers were touching, would know that there's a pretty serious kickback. So this ground here, we can just make it go down to the power supply, basically like so. And I see there's an extra hole down on the regulator board there. We need to get power to this. All I need to do is wire the switch in. This wire here needs to be hot all the time to turn the relay on. So we got to put it on this side of the relay, because this is the voltage coming from the regulator. There we go. I think that's going to work a little bit better like that. Now the other side of the switch is just going to come over here and go to the cathode of that diode, the top of the relay coil. So there we are, that's all connected. Now I just need to go back and put this ground back down into the power supply board, and then it'll be all done. That way when we turn the power switch on, it just flips this relay on, takes all the current load off the power switch through this big old Shrek relay here, which is kind of overkill. Yeah, my buddy number 3 down there in that Carolina, I can never remember if it's north or the south, and I think he gets mad at me. Man, I don't know, I got a 50-50 chance of getting it right, but yeah, my buddy number 3 turned me on to these Shrek relays here. I really like these things. The contacts in them are awesome. Now this is immense overkill because I think this is a 6 or an 8 amp. Contacts in these things are made of fine silver. They're pretty top notch. Alrighty, there we go. Moment of truth. Let's see if it works. Well, that's a good sign. Has tons of volume. It didn't have that before.
Shit again, down the road anyhow. But man, I didn't know if I was making that way or not.
Works like an absolute $1,000,000. I got so much volume on this thing, I don't even have to turn it past a third of the way.
There you go.
Hey, I appreciate you watching my videos very much. You take care and have a great day.